3 months ago, I walked into my brother's office with a cashier's check for $2.3 million and bought his entire construction company right out from under him. You should have seen his face when I slid that check across his mahogany desk, the same desk where he'd humiliated me 6 months earlier, telling me I was too dumb to run a lemonade stand, let alone a real business. But that's not even the craziest part of this story. What I did next? That's when things got really interesting. My name is Zoe, and I'm about to tell you how I went from being the family disappointment to destroying my brother's entire world, and why he absolutely deserved every single bit of it. See, Derek always thought he was untouchable. Golden boy, star athlete, successful businessman living it up in Austin, Texas. For 31 years, he's been shoving his success in my face, making me feel like I was nothing more than his loser little sister who couldn't get her act together. Well, guess what, Derek? Your little sister just became your boss. And honey, payback is a bitch. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because the way this all went down, man, it's like something straight out of a movie. It was last Christmas at our parents' house in Westlake Hills. You know, that part of Austin where all the tech millionaires live. The whole family was there, and Derek was doing his usual thing, peacocking around in his brand new Tesla, talking about how his construction company was absolutely dominating the Austin market. Business is so good, he kept saying. I'm thinking about franchising, maybe going national. I'm sitting there in my Target sweater, working my boring marketing job, just trying to get through dinner without him taking another shot at me. But Derek? Oh, Derek had other plans. You know what, Zoe? He said, that trademark smirk spreading across his face. I've been thinking about expanding into property management. Maybe you could help me out. You know, answer phones, file papers, that kind of thing. Simple stuff that even you couldn't mess up. The whole table went quiet. Mom started nervously clearing plates. Dad suddenly became very interested in his wine glass. But Derek? He was just getting started. I mean, let's be real here, he continued, leaning back in his chair like he was holding court. You're 28 years old, still living in that cramped apartment off South Lamar, making what, 35 grand a year? Maybe it's time to accept that some people are just cut out for bigger things, and some people, he gestured at me with his fork, some people are meant to work for their more successful siblings. I felt my face burning. 28 years of this crap, and I was done. But instead of exploding like I usually did, something different happened. Something clicked. You know what, Derek? I said, my voice deadly calm. You're absolutely right. Some people are cut out for bigger things. He grinned, thinking he'd won. Finally, some self-awareness. Oh, I'm very self-aware, I replied, standing up from the table. I'm aware that you have no idea what's coming for you. The room was dead silent. Derek's smirk faltered just a little bit. What's that supposed to mean? He asked. I smiled, and let me tell you, it was the sweetest smile I'd ever smiled in my entire life. You'll see. And with that, I walked out of that dining room and started planning the most epic revenge in sibling history. But before I tell you exactly how I pulled off the impossible, how I went from broke marketing coordinator to buying out my brother's entire company, I need you guys to do me a favor. If you're loving this story so far, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And definitely hit that subscribe button because, trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. This story gets absolutely wild. Now let me tell you about the night that changed everything. That night, I drove home to my cramped apartment off South Lamar. Thanks for the reminder, Derek. And I was fuming. I paced around my living room for hours, replaying every humiliating word he'd said. But somewhere around 2 a.m., when I was stress-eating leftover Chinese takeout and scrolling through social media, I stumbled across something that made me stop cold. It was a LinkedIn post from Derek's business partner, Marcus. Yeah, Derek had a business partner that he conveniently never mentioned during his bragging sessions. The post was celebrating their company's record-breaking quarter and mentioning how they were exploring new investment opportunities. Now here's where it gets interesting. I clicked on Marcus's profile, and let me tell you, this dude was not what I expected. While Derek was all flash and ego, Marcus seemed like the actual brains behind the operation. MIT educated, former Goldman Sachs analyst, the whole 9 yards. And according to his posts, he was getting pretty frustrated with Derek's management style. I spent the next 3 hours deep diving into everything I could find about their company, Barrett and Associates Construction. And y'all, what I found was absolutely mind-blowing. First off, Derek wasn't nearly as successful as he pretended to be. Sure, the company was making money, but it was all because of Marcus's financial genius and their crew of incredibly skilled contractors. Derek was basically just the face of the operation, schmoozing clients and taking credit for everyone else's work. But here's the kicker. And this is where my marketing background actually came in handy. I started looking at their client reviews, their project timelines, their subcontractor relationships. Derek was hemorrhaging money left and right because he had no idea how to actually run a business. He was all about the flashy projects and the big-name clients, but he was completely ignoring the fundamentals. Late fees, cost overruns, dissatisfied customers. It was all there if you knew where to look. Marcus was basically holding the whole thing together with duct tape and sheer willpower. That's when I had my light bulb moment. What if Derek's little sister wasn't as dumb as he thought? What if she'd been paying attention all these years, learning from his mistakes, understanding exactly what he was doing wrong? I grabbed my laptop and started putting together a business plan. Not just any business plan, a complete analysis of Barrett & Associates construction, identifying every single weakness, every missed opportunity, every way they could be doing things better. By the time the sun came up, I had a 40-page document that would have made my old business professors weep with joy. I'd figured out how to cut their costs by 30%, improve their project timelines by 50%, and increase their profit margins by nearly 40%. But more importantly, I'd figured out exactly how to take Derek down. See, I'd discovered something that Derek didn't know I knew, something that Marcus had been trying to tell him for months, but Derek was too arrogant to listen. The company was about to land the biggest contract in Austin construction history, a $50 million mixed-use development project downtown, the kind of project that would set them up for life. But Derek was so busy playing the big shot that he was about to blow it. I could see it coming from a mile away. He was going to screw up the pitch, lose the contract, and probably destroy his partnership with Marcus in the process. Unless, of course, someone stepped in to save the day. Someone who actually understood business. Someone who could give Marcus exactly what he needed to succeed. Someone like me. I spent the next 2 weeks reaching out to Marcus through professional channels. Nothing obvious, just a few thoughtful comments on his LinkedIn posts. Some shared connections through my marketing network. I positioned myself as a consultant who specialized in construction industry marketing and operations optimization. Marcus bit hard. We met for coffee at Radio Coffee on Barton Springs Road. And I kid you not, this man was desperate. He'd been trying to get Derek to modernize their operations for 2 years, but Derek kept shutting him down, insisting that old-school relationship building was all they needed. I don't know what to do, Marcus told me, running his hands through his hair. Derek's a good guy, but he's stuck in the past. We could be the biggest construction company in Central Texas, but he won't listen to anyone else's ideas. That's when I made my move. What if I told you, I said, leaning forward, that I could show you exactly how to win that downtown development contract, and not just win it, but execute it so perfectly that you'd become the go-to firm for every major project in Austin. Marcus's eyes lit up. You could do that? I pulled out my tablet and showed him my analysis. 40 pages of pure business strategy gold. His jaw literally dropped. This is... He scrolled through the document, his expression getting more and more excited. This is exactly what we need. Where did you get all this information? I smiled. Let's just say I'm very good at research. What I didn't tell him was that I'd been watching Derek screw up for years. Every family gathering, every bragging session, every story about his business genius, I'd been taking notes. I knew his weaknesses better than he knew them himself. By the end of our meeting, Marcus had hired me as a strategic consultant. My job was to help them prepare for the downtown development pitch and optimize their operations for future growth. Derek had no idea his little sister was about to become his company's secret weapon. But here's the thing about revenge. It's not just about winning. It's about making sure your target knows exactly who beat them and why. And I was just getting started. Working with Marcus was like being in business school, except instead of theoretical case studies, I was getting hands-on experience with a multi-million-dollar construction company. And let me tell you, it was both exhilarating and terrifying. Marcus had me set up as an independent contractor, so Derek never saw my name on any of the paperwork. As far as he knew, Marcus had just gotten really good at business strategy overnight, which honestly was probably what Derek expected anyway. He never gave Marcus enough credit for being the actual brains of the operation. My first week on the job, I was like a detective gathering evidence. I spent hours going through their project files, client communications, and financial records. And y'all, what I found was even worse than I'd imagined. Derek wasn't just bad at business. He was actively sabotaging their success. He'd promise clients impossible deadlines just to close deals, then leave Marcus to figure out how to make it work. He'd hire subcontractors based on who bought him the most expensive dinners, not who did the best work. And don't even get me started on his bookkeeping. I'm pretty sure he was using a system he'd made up in his head, because nothing added up properly. But the real kicker? Derek had been lying to our parents about how successful he was. That Tesla he was so proud of? Leased. The fancy office in downtown Austin? Subletting from another company. Even his house in Westlake Hills was mortgaged to the hilt. Meanwhile, Marcus was quietly keeping the whole operation afloat, while Derek took credit for everything good and blamed everyone else for everything bad. It was actually kind of heartbreaking to watch. You know what the worst part is? Marcus told me one afternoon when we were reviewing their project pipeline. Derek's not a bad person. He's so insecure that he can't stand the idea of not being the smartest person in the room. So he makes these impulsive decisions to prove he's in charge, and then I have to spend weeks cleaning up the mess. That's when I started to understand Derek better than I ever had before. All those years of putting me down, all that arrogance and bragging, it wasn't coming from a place of confidence. It was coming from a place of fear. Fear that people would figure out he wasn't actually as smart as he pretended to be. But understanding him didn't make me forgive him. If anything, it made me more determined to show him exactly what real intelligence looked like. I spent the next month completely revolutionizing their operations. I implemented project management software that actually worked. I renegotiated contracts with their subcontractors to get better rates and more reliable timelines. I created a customer service system that turned their mediocre reviews into 5-star ratings. And the downtown development pitch? I didn't just help them prepare for it. I basically wrote the entire presentation myself. Marcus was blown away. "Zoe, this is incredible. You've transformed our entire business model. We're going to kill this pitch." But I had bigger plans than just helping them win one contract. I'd been doing some digging into the development company behind the project, and I'd discovered something very interesting. They weren't just looking for a construction partner. They were looking for a construction company to acquire. See, Meridian Development Group was expanding aggressively throughout Texas, and they wanted to own their construction capabilities rather than just contracting them out. They were specifically looking for a well-run, profitable construction company with growth potential. In other words, they were looking for exactly what Barrett and Associates Construction could become, with the right management. That's when I realized I didn't just want to help Marcus succeed. I wanted to own the whole damn thing. I started putting together a business plan that would make Derek's head spin. Not just a plan to buy Barrett and Associates Construction, but a plan to turn it into the most successful construction company in Texas. I mapped out expansion opportunities, calculated potential profit margins, and identified exactly how much capital I'd need to make it happen. The only problem? I didn't have $2.3 million lying around. Hell, I barely had $2,300 in my checking account, but I had something better than money. I had information. And I had a plan. Remember how I mentioned Derek was hemorrhaging money? Well, I'd figured out exactly why. He'd been using the company's line of credit as his personal piggy bank, funding his flashy lifestyle instead of investing in business growth. Marcus knew something was wrong with their finances, but he trusted Derek to handle the money side of things. Big mistake. Derek had put the company in a seriously vulnerable position. They were over-leveraged, behind on several loan payments, and one bad month away from serious financial trouble. The bank was already asking questions. But here's the beautiful part. I knew exactly how to fix it. All of their problems were solvable if you knew what you were doing. Which Derek didn't, but I did. So I started making some calls. Not to Derek, obviously, but to some connections I'd made through my marketing work. Austin's a small town when it comes to business, and I'd been quietly building relationships for years. One of those relationships was with Jennifer Walsh, a private equity investor who specialized in construction and real estate. Jennifer and I had worked together on a marketing campaign for one of her portfolio companies, and she'd always told me to call her if I ever had any interesting investment opportunities. Well, guess what? I had a very interesting investment opportunity. I set up a meeting with Jennifer at the Four Seasons downtown, and I brought my complete analysis of Barrett and Associates Construction. Not just the problems, but the solutions. Not just the current state, but the potential. "This is impressive, Zoe," Jennifer said, scrolling through my presentation on her tablet. You're talking about acquiring a company that's basically being run into the ground by its current owner. Exactly, I replied. But look at the underlying fundamentals. Great location, solid reputation with clients, excellent operational partner in Marcus. The only problem is leadership. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. And you think you can provide that leadership? I smiled. I know I can. I've been studying this company for months, and I've already implemented changes that have improved their efficiency by 50%. Give me full control, and I can turn this into a $50 million company within 2 years. What I didn't tell Jennifer was that the owner she'd be buying out was my own brother. Some secrets are worth keeping, at least until the right moment. By the end of our meeting, Jennifer was ready to move forward. She'd provide the capital, I'd provide the expertise, and together we'd turn Barrett and Associates Construction into the success story Derek always claimed it already was. But first, I had to set the trap. Setting up Derek's downfall was like playing chess, except I was about 10 moves ahead, and he didn't even know we were playing the same game. While he was busy taking credit for all the improvements I'd been making through Marcus, I was quietly documenting every single mistake he'd made over the past 3 years. And trust me, there were a lot of them. The first thing I did was create a comprehensive audit of the company's finances. Jennifer had connected me with a forensic accountant who specialized in construction companies, and what we found was absolutely shocking. Derek hadn't just been irresponsible with money, he'd been borderline fraudulent. He'd been double-billing clients for materials, pocketing the difference. He'd been claiming personal expenses as business write-offs. He'd even been paying himself a salary that was 40% higher than what he'd reported to Marcus. No wonder the company was always struggling with cash flow. But the real smoking gun was what I found in his communications with the bank. Derek had been lying about the company's financial position for months, providing false revenue projections to secure additional lines of credit. If the bank found out, they could call in all their loans immediately. In other words, Derek had built his entire house of cards on a foundation of lies and financial manipulation. All I had to do was give it a little push. The beauty of my plan was that I didn't have to do anything illegal or unethical. I just had to make sure the right people knew the truth at the right time. I started by having my forensic accountant prepare a detailed report on the company's actual financial position. Not the fantasy numbers Derek had been reporting, but the real ones. Then I had Jennifer's lawyers draw up a purchase agreement that would protect both the company and its employees from Derek's mismanagement. But I wasn't ready to make my move yet. First, I wanted to make sure Derek knew exactly who was beating him. The downtown development pitch was scheduled for a Friday morning in February. I'd spent weeks preparing Marcus and the rest of the team, making sure they had everything they needed to absolutely nail the presentation. Derek, meanwhile, was planning to show up and schmooze the clients while everyone else did the actual work. Typical Derek. The night before the pitch, I got a call from Marcus. He was panicking. "Zoe, we have a problem," he said. "Derek just told me he's planning to completely change our presentation tomorrow. He wants to scrap everything we've prepared and wing it instead." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This was exactly the kind of impulsive, ego-driven decision that had been destroying the company for years. "What's his reasoning?" I asked. "He says our presentation is too technical, and that he can sell the project better with relationship building and charisma." Marcus sounded exhausted. "Zoe, if we lose this contract because Derek wants to improvise, I'm done. I can't keep cleaning up his messes." That's when I knew it was time to make my move. "Marcus," I said, "what if I told you that you didn't have to clean up his messes anymore? What if there was a way to get Derek out of the picture entirely?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "I'm talking about a buyout, a complete acquisition of Barrett and Associates Construction by investors who actually know how to run a business." "That's impossible," Marcus said. "Derek would never sell. This company is his entire identity." I smiled. "Marcus, Derek doesn't have a choice. He's broke." I spent the next hour explaining everything to Marcus. The financial mismanagement, the lies to the bank, the precarious position Derek had put the company in. By the time I was done, Marcus was furious. "I can't believe this," he said. "I've been working my ass off to keep this company afloat, and Derek's been sabotaging us the whole time." "That's why we need to act fast," I told him. "I have investors ready to make an offer, but we need to present Derek with a fait accompli. If he thinks he has time to maneuver, he'll find a way to make everything worse." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" I need you to trust me, and I need you to let Derek bomb the presentation tomorrow. Are you crazy? If we lose this contract, the company's finished. Marcus, I said, my voice completely calm. The company's already finished. Derek killed it. What I'm offering you is a chance to resurrect it under new management. The next morning, I got to the Meridian Development Group offices early, not to attend the presentation. I wasn't officially involved with Barrett and Associates Construction yet, but to have a private meeting with their CEO, Robert Meridian. Ms. Barrett, he said, shaking my hand in the lobby. I have to say I'm curious about this meeting. My team speaks very highly of your strategic consulting work. I smiled. Mr. Meridian, I think you're going to find our conversation very interesting. We sat down in his office, and I laid out my entire plan. The acquisition of Barrett and Associates Construction, the operational improvements I'd already implemented, the potential for massive growth in the Austin market. This is fascinating, Robert said, reviewing my projections. But I have to ask, why are you bringing this to me instead of working with the current owner? Because, I said, the current owner is about to demonstrate exactly why he's not qualified to run this company. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. He's bombing, completely off script. Clients look confused. I showed Robert the message. Mr. Meridian, would you mind if we took a quick look at how that presentation is going? Robert's office had a view of the conference room where the Barrett and Associates presentation was taking place. We could see Derek gesticulating wildly while the Meridian team looked increasingly uncomfortable. Is that supposed to be a professional presentation? Robert asked. That, I said, is exactly what I'm trying to fix. By the time the presentation was over, Derek had managed to not only lose the contract, but also insult two of Meridian's senior executives and make a joke about their commitment to sustainable construction practices. Marcus came straight to my apartment afterward, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 2 hours. It's over, he said. Derek completely destroyed everything we've been working for. The Meridian team looked like they wanted to throw us out of the building. Marcus, I said, what if I told you that we can still salvage this? How? I pulled out my phone and showed him the text I'd received from Robert Meridian an hour earlier. Very interested in acquisition proposal. Let's move forward. Marcus stared at the message, then looked at me with a mixture of confusion and hope. Zoe, he said slowly, who exactly are you? I smiled. I'm the person who's about to buy your company. The look on Marcus's face when I told him the truth was absolutely priceless. It was like watching someone solve a puzzle they didn't even know they were working on. Wait, he said, sinking into my couch. You're Derek's sister? The one he's always talking about? The one he's always talking shit about, I corrected. Yeah, that's me. Marcus just stared at me for a long moment. Then he started laughing. Not just chuckling, full-blown, tears in his eyes. Can't catch his breath laughing. This is insane, he said, when he finally calmed down. Derek has been bragging for months about how much smarter he is than his loser little sister, and the whole time, his loser little sister has been the one keeping his company from collapsing. Gets better, I said. Want to know what I do for a living? You're a marketing coordinator, right? At some tech startup? I pulled out my laptop and showed him my real LinkedIn profile. Not the basic one Derek had probably seen, but the professional one I used for consulting work. I'm a strategic business consultant specializing in operational optimization and growth strategies for mid-market companies, I said. I've worked with over 30 companies in the past 5 years, helping them streamline operations, improve profitability, and prepare for acquisition or expansion. Marcus's jaw dropped. But Derek said you barely finished college. He said you were working some dead-end job because you couldn't handle anything more challenging. Derek says a lot of things, I replied. Most of them are bullshit. I showed Marcus my portfolio, case studies of companies I'd helped turn around, testimonials from CEOs and private equity firms, my track record of success. By the time I was done, he was shaking his head in amazement. This is incredible, he said. You're not just qualified to run Barrett and Associates Construction. You're overqualified. Why didn't you ever tell Derek about this? Because Derek never asked, I said simply. He was too busy assuming he knew everything about me to actually get to know me. That's when I told Marcus about my real plan. Not just to buy the company, but to transform it into exactly what Derek had always claimed it was. The most successful construction company in Austin. With Jennifer's capital and my strategic expertise, we can expand into commercial real estate development, residential construction, and property management. I explained. We're talking about a potential $100 million company within 5 years. Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing everything I'd told him. There's just one thing I don't understand, he said finally. Why are you doing this? I mean, obviously Derek's been a jerk to you, but this seems like a lot of effort for revenge. I considered his question carefully. It was fair. From the outside, it probably did look like I was going to extreme lengths just to get back at my brother. It's not just about Derek, I said. It's about everyone Derek has hurt. You, for starters. You've been carrying this company on your back for years while he takes credit for your work. What about the employees who've been laid off because Derek made stupid financial decisions? What about the clients who've been overcharged and underserved? What about the subcontractors who haven't been paid on time because Derek was using company money for personal expenses? Marcus nodded slowly. I never thought about it that way. Derek's not just a bad brother, I continued. He's a bad business owner. He's been hurting people for years, and he keeps getting away with it because he's charming and confident, and everyone assumes he knows what he's doing. But I actually do know what I'm doing, and I can fix everything he's broken. That's when Marcus made the decision that would change everything. Okay, he said. I'm in. What do we need to do? The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, paperwork, and careful planning. Jennifer's team worked around the clock to structure the acquisition deal. My forensic accountant provided the documentation we needed to prove Derek's financial mismanagement. Marcus gathered support from the other employees and key subcontractors. Meanwhile, Derek was completely oblivious to what was happening around him. He was too busy trying to damage control the disaster of his presentation to Meridian Development Group. He kept insisting that he could fix things and rebuild the relationship, but every email he sent just made things worse. The final piece of the puzzle came when the bank called in Derek's loans. My forensic accountant had quietly provided them with the real financial information about Barrett and Associates Construction, and they were not happy about being lied to for months. Derek had 30 days to pay back $1.8 million in outstanding loans, or the bank would seize the company's assets. That's when I knew it was time to make my move. I called Derek and asked him to meet me for coffee. He suggested some trendy place in downtown Austin, but I insisted on a quiet spot in South Austin where we could talk privately. This is weird, Derek said, when he sat down across from me at Radio Coffee. We haven't hung out one-on-one since, I don't know, maybe high school? Yeah, well, I thought it was time we had a real conversation, I said. Derek looked stressed. His usual cocky demeanor was cracking, and I could see the anxiety underneath. The weight of his financial problems was clearly getting to him. Look, Zoe, he said, if this is about Christmas dinner, I'm sorry. I was drunk, and maybe I said some things I shouldn't have. I almost laughed. After everything that had happened, he thought this was about hurt feelings. Derek, I said, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. How's business really going? He straightened up, immediately going into sales mode. Business is great. I mean, we hit a little bump with that Meridian deal, but I'm already working on 3 other major projects that are going to be even bigger. What about your finances? Derek's eye twitched. What about them? Are you having cash flow problems? Every business has cash flow challenges, he said defensively. It's totally normal in construction. You wouldn't understand. There it was. Even when he was clearly drowning, Derek couldn't resist taking a shot at my intelligence. You're right, I said calmly. I probably wouldn't understand. I mean, I'm just too dumb to run a business, right? Derek had the grace to look embarrassed. Zoe, come on. I was just what? Just being honest about what you think of me? He sighed. Look, I know I've been hard on you over the years, but it's only because I want you to reach your potential. You're smart. You just need to focus more. Maybe get some business experience. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us. Derek, I'm going to make you an offer. What kind of offer? I'm going to solve all your problems. Derek laughed nervously. What are you talking about? I know about the bank loans, I said quietly. I know about the cash flow problems. I know about the lies you've been telling Marcus about the company's financial position. All the color drained from Derek's face. How do you... I also know that you have 30 days to come up with $1.8 million or you're going to lose everything. Derek just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But here's the thing, I continued. I can make all of that go away. I have investors who are ready to buy Barrett and Associates Construction for $2.3 million. That's enough to pay off all your debts and still leave you with a nice chunk of change to start over. That's impossible, Derek said. Nobody would pay that much for a company with our current problems. I smiled. They would if they knew the company's real potential, if they understood how profitable it could be with proper management. Derek leaned forward. What's the catch? No catch. Just one condition. Which is? I looked him straight in the eye. You have to admit that you were wrong about me. Derek blinked. What? You have to admit that I'm not too dumb to run a business. You have to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, your little sister actually knows what she's talking about. Derek was quiet for a long moment. I could see him weighing his options, trying to figure out if there was some other way out of his mess. Finally, he said, Okay, fine. You're obviously not as dumb as I thought. Happy now? Not quite, I said. I pulled a folder out of my bag and slid it across the table. I need you to look at this first. Derek opened the folder, and his face went from confused to shocked to absolutely horrified as he read through the acquisition paperwork. The acquiring entity is ZB Strategic Holdings, he said, his voice barely a whisper. That's right. ZB, Zoe Barrett. He looked up at me, and I could see the exact moment when everything clicked into place. You're the investor. I'm the investor. Derek stared at the papers, then at me, then back at the papers. This is insane. You don't have this kind of money. You're right, I don't. But my business partners do, and they trust my judgment enough to back me in acquiring and running Barrett and Associates Construction. Your business partners? Jennifer Walsh from Walsh Capital Partners and Robert Meridian from Meridian Development Group. You know, the people whose contract you lost last week because you decided to wing a multi-million-dollar presentation. Derek's hands were actually shaking now. This isn't real. This can't be real. It's real, Derek. In fact, it gets better. I pulled out my phone and showed him the congratulatory email I'd received from Robert Meridian that morning. Meridian Development Group has agreed to give Barrett and Associates Construction the downtown development contract, contingent on the acquisition going through under new management. Derek read the email, and I watched his entire world crumble in real time. So, let me get this straight, he said slowly. You're buying my company. You're getting the contract I lost. And you're doing it all because I said you were too dumb to run a business. That's exactly right. Derek was quiet for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was completely different. Smaller. Defeated. How long have you been planning this? Since Christmas dinner, I said. But if I'm being honest, Derek, you've been giving me reasons to want revenge for my entire life. I never... He stopped, seeming to think better of whatever he was about to say. I never meant to hurt you, Zoe. I really didn't. But you did hurt me. For years. And you enjoyed it. Derek nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess I did. That was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get from him. And we both knew it. So what happens now? He asked. I slid a pen across the table. Now you sign the paperwork, and we both move on with our lives. You get enough money to pay off your debts and start over somewhere else. I get a company that I can actually run properly. Derek picked up the pen, then set it down again. Can I ask you something? He said. What if I had been different? What if I had supported you instead of putting you down all these years? I thought about that for a moment. Then maybe we'd be partners instead of adversaries. Maybe Barrett and Associates Construction would already be the successful company I'm going to turn it into. Derek nodded. I really screwed up, didn't I? Yeah, I said. You really did. He picked up the pen again and signed his name on every page that required his signature. When he was done, he looked up at me with something that might have been respect. For what it's worth, he said, I think you're going to do great things with the company. I know I am, I replied. And that's how I bought my brother's company with a cashier's check and a decade's worth of accumulated rage. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no, it gets so much better. The first day I walked into Barrett and Associates Construction as the new owner was absolutely surreal. Marcus had called an all-hands meeting to introduce me to the team, and I could see the confusion on everyone's faces when this woman in her 20s walked in claiming to be their new boss. Excuse me, said Tommy Rodriguez, the head foreman who'd been with the company for 8 years. Are you Derek's assistant or something? No, I said, standing at the front of the conference room. I'm Derek's replacement. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Look, I know this is weird, I continued. Most of you have never seen me before. But I'm the person who's been working behind the scenes for the past few months to turn this company around. All those operational improvements you've been seeing, the new project management software, the better scheduling system, that was me. Tommy raised his hand. Wait, you're the consultant Marcus has been talking about? That's right, but you're just a kid. I smiled. Tommy, I'm 28 years old, I have a master's degree in business administration, and I've spent the last 5 years helping companies just like this one become more profitable and efficient. Age doesn't matter. Results do. That's when I pulled up the presentation I'd prepared showing exactly what we were going to accomplish together. New equipment purchases, expanded service offerings, better employee benefits, profit-sharing bonuses based on company performance. Holy shit, whispered Maria Santos, the office manager. You're serious about all this? Dead serious, I said. Derek ran this company like it was his personal piggy bank. I'm going to run it like the professional operation it should have been all along. By the end of the meeting, I could see the skepticism turning into cautious optimism. These people had been working their asses off for years, while Derek took credit for their efforts. The idea that someone actually valued their contributions was pretty revolutionary, but I knew talking was easy. I had to prove myself through actions. My first week as owner, I did something Derek had never done in 3 years of running the company. I went to every single job site and talked to every single worker. I learned their names, asked about their families, and most importantly, listened to their ideas about how we could do things better. The feedback was incredible. These guys had been thinking about operational improvements for years, but Derek had never bothered to ask for their input. Within days, I had a list of 50 concrete suggestions for making our projects more efficient and profitable. My second week, I renegotiated our insurance policies and equipment leases, saving the company $40,000 annually. My third week, I landed 2 new residential projects by reaching out to clients Derek had alienated with his poor communication. By the end of my first month, we were operating at 35% higher efficiency than we'd ever achieved under Derek's leadership. But the real test came when we started work on the Meridian Development Group project. Robert Meridian had given us the contract, but he was watching our every move. This was a $50 million project that would establish Barrett and Associates Construction as a major player in the Austin market, or destroy us if we screwed it up. I knew we couldn't afford even the smallest mistake. I spent 2 weeks creating the most detailed project plan in the company's history. Every timeline, every budget item, every potential risk factor was mapped out and accounted for. I brought in specialized subcontractors for the complex work and hired additional project managers to ensure nothing fell through the cracks. Marcus thought I was being overly cautious. Zoe, you don't need to micromanage everything. The team knows what they're doing. Marcus, I said, this project is going to determine whether Barrett and Associates Construction becomes a major regional player or remains a small local company. There's no such thing as being too careful. I was vindicated when we encountered our first major challenge 6 weeks into the project. The city planning department had changed some environmental regulations that affected our foundation work, potentially delaying the entire project by 3 months. Under Derek's leadership, this would have been a disaster. He would have panicked, blamed everyone else, and probably ended up in a screaming match with the city planners. Instead, I had anticipated this exact scenario in my project plan. I'd already researched alternative foundation techniques that would comply with the new regulations, and I'd built buffer time into our schedule specifically for regulatory changes. We adapted our approach, implemented the new foundation design, and completed that phase of the project 2 days ahead of the original schedule. Robert Meridian was impressed. Zoe, I have to say, your team's adaptability and forward planning are remarkable. Derek never showed this level of strategic thinking. That's because Derek was always reacting to problems instead of anticipating them, I replied. Good business is about preparation, not improvisation. By month 3, word was spreading throughout the Austin construction community about the new Barrett and Associates Construction. We were getting inquiries for projects we never would have been considered for under Derek's leadership. I hired 2 additional project managers and invested in state-of-the-art equipment that would allow us to take on more complex commercial projects. Our employee retention rate went from 60% to 95%. Our client satisfaction scores jumped from 3.2 out of 5 to 4, 8 out of 5. But the moment I knew we'd truly succeeded came when Derek showed up at the job site. I was reviewing blueprints with Marcus and Tommy when I saw a familiar figure standing at the construction fence, just watching our crew work. Derek looked older, somehow smaller than I remembered. He was wearing jeans and a polo shirt instead of his usual expensive suits. Should I go talk to him? Marcus asked. No, I said. I'll handle it. I walked over to the fence where Derek was standing. Up close, I could see that he'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Hey, he said when he saw me approaching. Hey yourself, what are you doing here? Derek gestured at the construction site. I wanted to see what you'd done with the place. I looked back at the site, where our crew was working with military precision. Every worker knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing and when. There were no delays, no confusion, no frustrated shouting matches between supervisors. "What do you think?" I asked. Derek was quiet for a long moment. "It looks professional," he said finally. "More professional than it ever looked when I was running things. That's because I actually know how to run things." "Yeah," Derek said. "I'm starting to figure that out." We stood there in comfortable silence for a while, watching the construction crew work. "Zoe," Derek said eventually, "I owe you an apology. A real one." I turned to look at him. "I'm listening. I spent so many years thinking I was better than you, smarter than you, more successful than you. But the truth is, I was just insecure. I was afraid that if I actually paid attention to who you really were, I'd have to admit that maybe you were the one with real potential." This was not the conversation I'd expected to have with Derek. "You know what the worst part is?" he continued. "I could have learned from you. All those years you were right there, and I could have asked for your help, your advice, your perspective. Instead, I spent all my energy trying to make you feel small so I could feel big. I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Sympathy for my brother." "Derek," I said, "what are you doing now? Are you working somewhere?" He smiled ruefully. "I'm managing a Home Depot in Round Rock. Turns out, when you don't have any actual management skills, your employment options are pretty limited. Are you okay with that?" Derek shrugged. "I'm learning to be. For the first time in my life, I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. It's actually kind of liberating." I had to admit, there was something refreshing about this version of Derek. Humble, self-aware, honest about his limitations. "Look," I said, "I don't know if this interests you, but I could use someone to handle our retail supply relationships. It's not glamorous work, but it pays decent, and you'd actually be helping the business instead of hurting it." Derek's eyes widened. "You'd hire me? After everything I did to you? I'd hire you if you could prove you've actually changed." "But Derek, if you screw this up, if you go back to your old arrogant credit-stealing ways, I will fire you so fast it'll make your head spin." Derek nodded seriously. "I understand. And Zoe, thank you. You didn't have to do this." "No, I didn't. But maybe it's time we tried being actual siblings instead of enemies." That was 4 months ago. Derek has been working in our supply chain department ever since. And to his credit, he's been exactly what I hoped: humble, hardworking, and grateful for the opportunity. Barrett & Associates Construction is now the fastest-growing construction company in Central Texas. We've completed the Meridian Development Group project 3 weeks ahead of schedule and $200,000 under budget. We have a backlog of projects that will keep us busy for the next 2 years. And me? I'm officially the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, with plans to expand into San Antonio and Dallas within the next 18 months. But the best part isn't the business success. It's watching Derek become the person he should have been all along. Someone who's proud of his work without needing to put others down. Someone who contributes to a team instead of trying to dominate it. 6 months after taking over Barrett & Associates Construction, I was sitting in the boardroom of the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Austin, presenting our expansion strategy to a room full of potential investors. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be pitching a $20 million growth plan to venture capitalists and private equity firms, I would have laughed in their face. But there I was, completely in my element, watching these seasoned business professionals hang on my every word. Barrett & Associates Construction has achieved 340% growth in the 6 months since restructuring, I told the room. We've gone from a small, struggling local company to the premier construction firm in Central Texas. Our client retention rate is 98%. Our employee satisfaction scores are off the charts, and we have a project backlog worth $85 million. Jennifer Walsh, who was sitting in the front row, smiled proudly. She'd become more than just an investor. She was a mentor and advocate who'd opened doors I never could have accessed on my own. The question, I continued, is not whether Barrett & Associates Construction can continue growing. The question is, how fast and how far we want to expand. I clicked to the next slide in my presentation, showing our proposed expansion timeline. Phase 1, San Antonio market entry, beginning next month. We've already secured office space and identified 3 major projects totaling $15 million in contract value. Phase 2, Dallas-Fort Worth expansion, targeting the high-end commercial construction market. Phase 3, Houston, focusing on energy sector construction and renovation projects. One of the investors, a sharp-looking woman from Goldman Sachs, raised her hand. "Ms. Barrett, this is an aggressive timeline. How do you plan to maintain quality control while scaling this rapidly?" It was exactly the question I'd been hoping for. "That's where our competitive advantage lies," I said. "Most construction companies try to grow by taking on more projects with the same systems and processes. We're growing by fundamentally improving how construction projects are managed." I switched to a slide showing our proprietary project management software, something I'd developed with a team of programmers over the past 4 months. This system integrates everything from initial client consultation to final project delivery. It tracks materials, schedules, budgets, regulatory compliance, and quality control in real time. Our project managers can identify and solve problems before they become expensive delays. The Goldman Sachs investor leaned forward. "Are you planning to license this software to other construction companies?" I smiled. "Actually, that's phase 4 of our expansion plan. Barrett Construction Software as a Service. We project it could generate $50 million in annual recurring revenue within 3 years." By the end of the presentation, I had commitments for $18 million in additional funding. More than enough to execute our expansion plan and position Barrett and Associates Construction as a major regional player. But the real validation came later that evening, when I got a text message from an unexpected source. "Saw the article about your expansion in the Austin Business Journal. Congratulations. You've built something amazing. Derek." The article he was referring to had come out that morning, featuring Barrett and Associates Construction as one of Austin's companies to watch. The journalist had interviewed me for nearly 2 hours, asking about everything from our operational innovations to our company culture. What struck me most about the article wasn't the praise for our business success. It was how the journalist described the transformation of the company under new leadership. She'd interviewed several employees who had worked under both Derek and me, and their comments were revealing. "It's like working for a completely different company," Tommy Rodriguez had told her. "Before, we never knew if we'd have the right materials on the job site, or if our schedules were realistic, or if we'd get paid on time. Now everything runs like clockwork." Maria Santos had been even more direct. "The old owner treated us like we were disposable. Zoe treats us like we're valuable. She listens to our ideas, invests in our training, and shares the profits when we succeed. I've never been happier at work." But the quote that really got to me was from Marcus. "Zoe didn't just buy this company, she rescued it. She rescued the employees who were being treated poorly, the clients who were being overcharged, and the reputation that was being destroyed by poor management. She saw potential where everyone else saw problems." Reading those words, I realized that what I'd accomplished was bigger than just business success or personal revenge. I'd created something that mattered, a company that treated people with respect, delivered exceptional value to clients, and contributed positively to the community. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Jennifer. "Zoe, congratulations on the funding round," she said. "But I'm calling about something else. I just got off the phone with Robert Meridian. He has a proposition for you." "What kind of proposition?" "Meridian Development Group is planning a massive mixed-use project in downtown San Antonio. They want Barrett and Associates Construction to be their exclusive construction partner. We're talking about a 5-year, $200 million project." I nearly dropped my phone. $200 million? It gets better. Robert wants to discuss a potential merger between Meridian Development and Barrett Construction. He's talking about creating a vertically integrated development and construction company that could dominate the Texas market. I sat down heavily in my chair. A year ago, I was making $35,000 a year as a marketing coordinator. Now I was being courted for a potential merger that would create one of the largest construction companies in the Southwest. "Jennifer," I said, "pinch me. I think I'm dreaming." She laughed. "You're not dreaming, Zoe. You're just really good at this." The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, negotiations, and due diligence. Robert Meridian flew in from Dallas twice to discuss the potential partnership. His lawyers and mine spent hundreds of hours structuring a deal that would benefit both companies. The proposed merger was fascinating from a strategic perspective. Meridian Development Group had the capital and the project pipeline, but they'd been struggling with construction cost overruns and timeline delays. Barrett and Associates Construction had the operational expertise and efficiency they needed, but we were limited by our capital constraints. Together, we could bid on projects that neither company could handle alone. "This is a game changer, Zoe," Robert told me over dinner at Uchi. Your operational innovations could revolutionize how large-scale development projects are managed. We're not just talking about growth, we're talking about fundamentally changing the industry. But the best part of the whole merger discussion was the moment when Robert asked me about my background and experience. I have to ask, he said, how did someone your age develop this level of business acumen? Your strategic thinking is remarkably sophisticated. I thought about how to answer that question. I could have talked about my MBA, my consulting experience, my natural analytical abilities, but the truth was simpler and more personal. I learned by watching someone else do everything wrong, I said. For years, I watched my brother make every possible mistake in running a construction company. I saw the consequences of poor planning, bad communication, financial mismanagement, and ego-driven decision-making. I decided I wanted to do the opposite of everything he did. Robert laughed. So your success is built on negative examples? Sometimes the best teacher is a really bad boss, I replied. A week later, Derek called me with news that I hadn't expected. Zoe, he said, I wanted you to hear this from me first. I'm leaving Austin. What? Why? I got a job offer in Denver. A construction company there needs someone to manage their supplier relationships and procurement processes. It's a good opportunity, and honestly, I think it's time for me to start fresh somewhere new. I felt a pang of sadness that surprised me. Derek and I had been building a tentative friendship over the past few months, and I'd started to enjoy having him around. Are you sure about this? I asked. I'm sure. Zoe, you've been incredibly generous in giving me a second chance, but I need to prove to myself that I can succeed on my own merits, not just because my little sister took pity on me. I understood what he meant. Derek needed to rebuild his self-respect, and he couldn't do that while working for the company he'd previously owned. I'm proud of you, I told him, and I'm proud of who you've become. I'm proud of you too, Derek replied. You accomplished something I never could have imagined. You didn't just build a successful business, you built something with integrity and purpose. We talked for another hour, reminiscing about our childhood and imagining what our relationship might look like going forward. For the first time in our lives, we were talking to each other as equals, without the competitiveness and resentment that had defined our dynamic for so many years. Promise me something, Derek said before we hung up. What? Promise me you'll keep being amazing. The world needs more people like you. 2 weeks after Derek left for Denver, the merger between Barrett and Associates Construction and Meridian Development Group was finalized. I became the COO of the combined company, with responsibility for all construction operations across Texas. The new company, Meridian Barrett Development and Construction, immediately became one of the largest privately held construction firms in the Southwest. Our first project under the merger was a $75 million mixed-use development in downtown San Antonio that would set new standards for sustainable construction in Texas. But success hadn't changed my fundamental approach to business. I still visited every job site, still learned every worker's name, still listened to ideas from the people actually doing the work. During the groundbreaking ceremony for our first San Antonio project, a reporter asked me what advice I'd give to other young entrepreneurs. Don't let anyone tell you what you're capable of, I said. The people who underestimate you are usually the same people who overestimate themselves. Focus on developing real skills, treating people with respect, and solving actual problems. Success will follow. Later that evening, as I stood on the roof of our new San Antonio office building, looking out over a city that was about to be transformed by our projects, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. A year ago, Derek had told me I was too dumb to run a business. Tonight, I was the COO of a $500 million construction and development company, with plans to expand across the entire Southwest. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about becoming so successful that their opinions become irrelevant. 1 year after the merger, I was standing in the boardroom of our brand new corporate headquarters in downtown Austin, looking out at the city skyline that our company was helping to reshape. In 12 months, Meridian Barrett Development and Construction had completed $120 million worth of projects and had another $300 million in our pipeline. But today wasn't about business. Today was about something much more personal. My assistant knocked on the door. Zoe, your parents are here. Mom and Dad walked into the boardroom, looking around in obvious amazement. They'd visited our offices before, but this was the first time they'd seen our new executive conference room with its panoramic views of Austin. Honey, Mom said, this is incredible. I still can't believe this is your company. Our company, I corrected gently. But thank you. Dad sat down at the massive conference table and shook his head. You know, Zoe, I owe you an apology. For what? For not seeing who you really were all those years. For letting Derek overshadow you. For not recognizing your potential. He paused, looking out at the city. For not being a better father to you. I sat down next to him. Dad, you don't need to apologize. You and Mom did the best you could with what you knew at the time. But we should have known better, Mom said. We should have seen that Derek's flash and confidence were hiding his insecurities, and that your quiet competence was hiding real talent. It was a conversation we'd been building toward for months. As my success had become impossible to ignore, my parents had started to realize that they'd fundamentally misunderstood both of their children. The thing is, I said, I needed to go through all of this. I needed Derek to underestimate me. I needed to feel overlooked and undervalued. It motivated me to become better than I ever would have been if everything had come easily. Dad smiled. You're giving Derek credit for your success? In a way, yes. His arrogance and condescension taught me the importance of humility and listening to others. His financial irresponsibility taught me the value of careful planning and fiscal discipline. His poor treatment of employees taught me how to build a positive company culture. That's very generous of you, Mom said. It's also strategic, I replied with a grin. The best leaders learn from both positive and negative examples. Derek provided plenty of negative examples. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Derek, who was now thriving in his new job in Denver. Saw the Forbes article about your expansion into Oklahoma. Amazing. Proud of my big shot little sister. The Forbes article he was referring to had come out that morning, featuring Meridian Barrett Development and Construction as one of the companies reshaping the Southwest. The journalist had spent weeks shadowing me, interviewing employees, and analyzing our business model. What made the article special wasn't just the recognition of our success, it was the focus on our company culture and values. The journalist had highlighted how we'd achieved rapid growth while maintaining industry-leading employee satisfaction and retention rates. Barrett's approach challenges the traditional construction industry model, the article read. Instead of competing solely on price, Meridian Barrett competes on value, efficiency, and innovation. Instead of treating workers as interchangeable labor, they invest in training, development, and profit sharing. Instead of chasing quick profits, they focus on building long-term relationships with clients and communities. The article had generated dozens of inquiries from other companies wanting to understand our management philosophy. I'd been invited to speak at business schools, industry conferences, and entrepreneur meetups. You know what's funny? I told my parents. A year ago, Derek thought he was teaching me about business by putting me down. Now I'm actually teaching business, but in a way that builds people up instead of tearing them down. That's the difference between you and Derek, Dad said. Derek always needed to feel superior to others. You want to help others become their best selves. We were interrupted by another knock on the door. Marcus walked in, followed by Tommy, Maria, and several other key employees. Sorry to interrupt, Marcus said, but we have some news we wanted to share. What's up? Tommy stepped forward, holding an envelope. We just heard back from the Better Business Bureau. Meridian Barrett Development and Construction has been selected as Austin's Business of the Year. I stared at the envelope, hardly believing what I was hearing. Are you serious? Dead serious, Maria said, grinning. The selection committee said they'd never seen a company achieve such rapid growth while maintaining such high ethical standards and employee satisfaction. My parents looked like they were about to cry with pride. Mom actually did start tearing up. There's more, Marcus said. The Austin Chamber of Commerce wants you to deliver the keynote address at their annual Business Leadership Conference. The theme is Building Success Through Character. I sat down heavily in my chair. Business of the Year, keynote speaker, Forbes feature article. A year and a half ago, I was making copies and answering phones at a tech startup. You know what the best part is? I said to everyone in the room. We're just getting started. Over the next hour, we talked about our expansion plans, upcoming projects, and long-term vision for the company. We were planning to enter the Phoenix and Las Vegas markets within the next 6 months, and we'd been approached by several companies interested in licensing our project management software. But what excited me most wasn't the business expansion. It was the impact we were having on the industry. Other construction companies were starting to adopt our employee-focused policies. Business schools were writing case studies about our operational innovations. Young entrepreneurs were reaching out for mentorship and advice. We're not just building buildings, I told the group. We're building a new model for how businesses can succeed while treating people with dignity and respect. After everyone left, I sat alone in the boardroom, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. My phone rang. It was Jennifer Walsh. "Zoe, I just wanted to congratulate you on the Business of the Year award," she said. "But I'm actually calling about something else. I've been approached by a documentary filmmaker who wants to tell your story." "My story?" "The whole thing. The family dynamics, Derek's arrogance, your strategic planning, the acquisition, the transformation of the company. She thinks it would make an incredible film about entrepreneurship, family relationships, and the power of perseverance." I thought about that for a moment. Would Derek be okay with being portrayed as the villain? Jennifer laughed. "Actually, she wants Derek to participate. She's interested in telling a complete story about how both of you grew and changed through this experience." The idea of a documentary was intriguing, but also terrifying. My story was personal, messy, and complicated. It wasn't just a simple tale of business success. It was about family trauma, sibling rivalry, revenge, and ultimately, forgiveness and growth. "Let me think about it," I told Jennifer. That evening, I called Derek to get his thoughts on the documentary idea. "Are you kidding me?" he said when I explained the concept. "A documentary about how my little sister destroyed my life and then rebuilt it better than I ever could have." "Derek, I'm joking, Zoe. I think it's a great idea. Our story might help other families understand how competition and resentment can poison relationships, and how healing and growth are always possible." "You'd really be willing to be interviewed about all the mistakes you made?" "Absolutely. If our story can help even one person avoid the mistakes I made, or help one person recognize their own potential the way you recognized yours, then it's worth any embarrassment I might feel." A month later, the documentary crew arrived in Austin to begin filming. Over the course of 2 weeks, they interviewed me, Derek, Marcus, our parents, employees, clients, and industry experts. They filmed at our job sites, in our offices, and at the family home where everything had started. The most emotional moment came when they filmed Derek and me having a conversation at the same coffee shop where I'd first confronted him about buying his company. Looking back, Derek said to me on camera, "What I'm most sorry about isn't losing the company. It's losing all those years when we could have been allies instead of enemies." "The thing is," I replied, "I don't think either of us was ready to be allies until we went through this experience. You needed to lose everything to understand what really mattered, and I needed to prove myself to understand my own capabilities." "Do you think we would have figured it out eventually?" Derek asked. "Maybe, but probably not. Sometimes it takes a crisis to force people to change and grow." The documentary, titled "Building Up: A Story of Family, Business, and Second Chances," premiered at the South by Southwest Film Festival 6 months later. It went on to win the Audience Award and was picked up by Netflix for streaming distribution. But more importantly, it started conversations. I received hundreds of messages from people who saw parallels to their own family dynamics, their own business challenges, their own struggles with self-doubt and sibling rivalry. One message that particularly moved me was from a young woman in Seattle. "Your story helped me realize that my brother's constant criticism wasn't about my abilities. It was about his insecurities. I just got promoted to regional manager at my company, and for the first time, I'm confident that I deserve it." Another came from a man in his 50s. "I've been the Derek in my family for decades, always putting down my younger sister because I was threatened by her intelligence. After watching your documentary, I called her for the first time in 3 years to apologize. We're having dinner next week." 6 months after the documentary's release, Derek called me with surprising news. "Zoe, I wanted you to hear this from me first. I'm getting married." "Derek, that's wonderful. Tell me about her." "Her name is Rachel, and she's a project manager at my company in Denver. She's smart, funny, and most importantly, she doesn't put up with any of my old bullshit." I laughed. "Sounds perfect for you." "The thing is," Derek said, "I never could have built a healthy relationship when I was the person I used to be. All that arrogance and insecurity would have poisoned anything good. I had to learn how to be honest about my limitations before I could appreciate someone else's strengths. I'm really happy for you, Derek." "Thanks. And Zoe, Rachel and I have been talking, and we want you to officiate the wedding." I was speechless for a moment. "Me? But I'm not ordained or anything." "You can get ordained online in like 10 minutes. But more importantly, you're the person who helped me become someone worth marrying. It would mean everything to have you perform the ceremony." Derek's wedding took place 6 months later in a beautiful outdoor venue in the Colorado mountains. As I stood before him and Rachel, looking out at a gathering of family and friends, I thought about how far we'd all come. "Derek and Rachel," I said, "your relationship represents something beautiful, the possibility of growth, change, and second chances. Derek, you've shown that it's possible to acknowledge your mistakes, learn from them, and become a better person. Rachel, you've shown that it's possible to love someone not for who they were, but for who they're becoming." After the ceremony, Derek pulled me aside. "Zoe," he said, "I have something for you." He handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with an engraving, "To the woman who taught me that being strong means lifting others up." "Derek," I started, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish. You could have destroyed me completely. You had every reason to, and you had the power to do it. Instead, you gave me the chance to rebuild myself into someone better. That's not just business success, Zoe. That's character." Today, 3 years after that Christmas dinner where Derek told me I was too dumb to run a business, Meridian Barrett Development and Construction is valued at over $800 million. We operate in 6 states, employ over 2,000 people, and our project management software is used by construction companies across the country. But the numbers aren't what I'm most proud of. I'm proud of the company culture we've built, where every employee is valued and heard. I'm proud of the communities we've helped develop and improve. I'm proud of the industry standards we've helped raise. And I'm proud of my relationship with Derek. We talk every week now, sharing business insights, family news, and life updates. He's become one of my closest advisors, and I've become one of his biggest supporters. Last month, Derek started his own consulting company, helping construction firms improve their procurement and supplier relationships. His first client? A small construction company in Denver whose owner reminded him of himself 3 years ago. Lots of ambition, but no real understanding of how to run a business. "I'm going to help him avoid all the mistakes I made," Derek told me. "Maybe save him from needing his little sister to buy him out." "Just remember," I said, "the goal isn't to make him feel small. The goal is to help him become bigger." "Trust me," Derek replied. "I learned that lesson from the best teacher I've ever had." So that's my story. How I went from being the family disappointment to building a business empire, and how I turned my brother from my biggest critic into my strongest supporter. The lesson isn't that revenge is sweet, although, let's be honest, it was pretty satisfying to see Derek's face when I slid that acquisition paperwork across the table. The lesson is that success is the best response to people who underestimate you, and that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who need our help the most. Derek was wrong when he said I was too dumb to run a business. But I would have been wrong if I'd used my success to destroy him completely. The real victory wasn't in beating Derek. It was in becoming the kind of person who could win with grace and use power to lift others up. And you know what? I'm just getting started. Before I finish this story, I want to ask you guys for a favor. If this story inspired you, motivated you, or just entertained you, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to me, and it helps me keep creating content that hopefully makes a difference in people's lives. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel because I have so many more stories to share. Stories about resilience, determination, family dynamics, and the incredible things that happen when people refuse to accept other people's limitations on their potential. Remember, the people who say you can't do something are usually just afraid that you can. Prove them wrong, but do it with character.